Just like a third world dictatorship, Democrats only see the law as a weapon to persecute their political opponents while they let rapists and murderers go free. We have got to get away from these political witch hunts and start focusing on making America great again.
Donald Trump lashing out at Democrats on the same day the January 6th committee heard from what could be its most important witness yet. Pat Cipollone, Donald Trump's former White House counsel, testifying behind closed doors for more than 7 hours yesterday, and never once invoking the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. Right before Cipollone's testimony, Trump released a statement criticizing Cipollone's cooperation with the committee, but interestingly, he did not attack him personally. No nicknames, no belittling, no nothing. Former United States Solicitor General Neil Katyal making this key point.
Donald Trump lashes out when he's scared, but when he's terrified, and with Cipollone he is, he's trying to actually butter him up.
Joining me now is Donald Trump's niece, Mary Trump. She's the author of Too Much and Never Enough. Mary, good morning. Always good to see you. Listen, by your training, you are a psychologist, and you also know you are someone who knows Trump very well. What do you think is going through his mind right now? Because there's an incredibly getting even larger amount of damning testimony that's coming out. And notably, he did not attack Pat Cipollone before Cipollone testified before the 1-6 committee.
Yeah, good morning, Katie. I think Neil Katyal summed it up quite nicely. To say that Donald is terrified is accurate and also an understatement. I think this might be the first time in his entire life that even he can't deny the walls may indeed be closing in. The amount of evidence that we've seen coming out at these committee hearings is overwhelming, but even more troubling for him is the witnesses now coming forward are increasingly important in terms of access and in terms of their positions in his administration, and they're unimpeachable. So it is not at all surprising that he would pull his punches when it comes to Pat Cipollone.
You know, you just spoke about the fact that Donald's legal troubles, they're really piling up. I mean, it's not like he didn't earn that moniker Teflon Don, right, for any reason. But let's look at this, though. Fulton County DA subpoenaed his allies in that election interference investigation. That's ongoing with the special grand jury. And ultimately, it may target Trump himself, according to Fani Willis, the DA. He's also set to be deposed next week in Letitia James's, the New York Attorney General's, civil probe into his business practices. Do you think his legal troubles, after all this time, may have finally caught up with him?
One can only hope. It would be almost unimaginable at this point if he got out of all of the both legal and civil charges against him. But again, you know, you said it, for decades now, he has always skated. And that's the only reason I'm not confident, hopeful, but not entirely confident that there will be consequences. But I do believe that the two cases you just mentioned in Georgia and New York are the strongest cases against him, or at least the cases that will have results more quickly than the others.
Until and unless perhaps the DOJ decides to take a swat at him. The New York Times is also reporting that Trump's interest in another presidential run is tied to his intensifying concerns over the 1-6 committee hearings. Since 1973, we all learned this through the Mueller investigation, the DOJ has taken the position that a sitting president may be investigated but not prosecuted for crimes. Do you think, Mary, that this is a motivating factor for your uncle to try to run again in 2024?
Katie, I think it's the motivating factor at this point, and I think it's therefore extraordinarily important that the DOJ call his bluff, because simply saying he's going to run or even making it official should not be a reason for him not to be prosecuted or indicted. It would just be an insult to the rule of law. So that doesn't mean he isn't going to try, because Donald has used two methods. He's run out the clock or he's outspent his opponents. That shouldn't be allowed here. And if on top of those two things, he's able to use as an excuse that he's running for office again, then I think that answers the question, is anybody above the law in America? And the answer would be yes. So we can't allow that to happen. I'm seriously hoping that Merrick Garland is keeping a close eye on things and coming down on the side of the rule of law.
The folks at the Lincoln Project, Mary, have just released a new video crystallizing what they see as an inevitable primary face-off between your uncle and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Let's take a quick look.
DeSantis betrayed you to become a star, and Ron's running against you. You made him, and he betrayed you. He's laughing at you, running against you. He's taking everything from you, and by the time you fight back, it will be too late.
Mary, your uncle is notoriously thin-skinned. How is he going to take that ad, and how much of a challenge does Ron DeSantis really pose for Donald Trump if he runs again?
I don't think he's going to take that well. And I think that DeSantis's contempt for Donald is pretty clear, maybe even to Donald himself. I think that DeSantis could challenge him, could be a reasonable challenger to Donald in 2024. And the truth of the matter is, I think with everything that's been happening, we see the tide turning. Support for Donald and his running for re-election is eroding. DeSantis is in the ascendancy. And I think our best hope actually is that DeSantis challenged Donald, and if Donald decides not to run and DeSantis does, that Donald does everything in his power to undermine DeSantis. Because a DeSantis presidency, believe it or not, would actually be potentially more frightening than another Trump administration.
Let the GOP Hunger Games begin. Mary Trump, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time. Winston Churchill once said, "Where there is great power, there is great responsibility." And there are few institutions that wield greater power than the United States Supreme Court, which makes the latest scandal involving some of the justices even more concerning. It's called Operation Higher Court, and Politico's details are alarming. Rob Schenck, the former leader of the Faith in Action Group, which is conveniently headquartered across the street from the Supreme Court, well, he left the group in 2018. But before he left, Schenck said that he recruited about 20 wealthy evangelical couples to fly to Washington, D.C. in order to wine and dine conservative Supreme Court Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and the late Antonin Scalia. According to Schenck, the couples were instructed before the dinners to use certain phrases to influence the justices while steering clear of the specifics of the cases pending before the court. For example, to talk about the importance of a child having a father and a mother, rather than engage in the particulars of a gay rights case. He said the goal was to create an ecosystem of support for the conservative justices. Politico wasn't able to get a response from Thomas, Alito, or the family of Scalia. But that group that's now called Faith and Liberty, well, that group is a part of the Liberty Council, whose founder and chairman claims he has no knowledge of these wine and dine events with the justices. So apparently these dinners were not widely known about, and that's exactly the point. Keep in mind, unlike other federal judges, the justices are currently allowed to police themselves in many circumstances, including recusals. That has become clear with the mounting revelations about Ginny Thomas and her quote-unquote activism. Justices also don't have to report their meals or the personal hospitality they receive at a host's private home. But it doesn't have to be this way. Last month, the Brennan Center for Justice looked at possible reforms for the Supreme Court, including expanding the court, term limits, consequences for judicial misconduct, and maybe the most important one of all, strengthening ethics requirements by creating a new code of judicial conduct, setting out specific circumstances for when justices must recuse themselves. I'm guessing that right now, plenty of Americans, including me, would love the chance to have one-on-one conversations with the justices that are making critical decisions about our personal lives. But apparently, that right, like so many others these days, seem to be reserved only for the few.